Good evening. Last year, North Acton High School's junior basketball team breezed past their opposition to win the Junior State Championships, mainly due to the work of their star player Dylan. Much was expected of the young player this year, as he was expected to continue to build his profile, with many believing he would end up in the junior college basketball system in the States. Year advisor, Mr. Stephan, claims his academic performance has more to do with his consistent omission from the rep teams than the other way around.
We need to understand what is happening with Dylan. The attitude, the truanting, and the disengagement. It isn't irregular for a teen going through adolescence. We have an opportunity to help this kid out. Obviously the lack of growth would have been a shock for him, in comparison to some of his mates, and this can be hard to come to terms with. Dusek states that normally the first obvious signs of emerging adolescence are biological, and Dylan is missing this. Dusek also states that early maturing adults have an advantage over late maturing adults. It is only a stage though. The distractions and attitude changes come with adolescence, but it is something that we can approach from multiple angles. What Mooson and Jones state in saying that they are less masculine, less groomed, and appear more childish. Dylan has been denied leadership and other adult-like responsibilities after having them previously, and this will impact his self-esteem. The lack of development also has a toll in the classroom, and if we don't attack the situation head-on, it's going to lead to more harm for his future. While Dylan is going through this situation now, it is proven that puberty is only a period of time, and while he is feeling the way he does at this age, it is something he will grow out of. It is also important to address the late maturing by addressing that he will go through growth at some stage. His educators must not single him out or treat him less like an adult because of his physical attributes, but more importantly to provide him with the responsibilities of an adult, helping to show that he is still valued, no matter what stage.
We see that Dylan has been removed from the basketball team. The other boys in the team have gone through puberty earlier and have become more athletically built more than him. It's affected him in ways outside of the basketball team itself. It's actually affected him in his socialization with other students. As the year advisor, I see him every other day now, rather than not seeing him on a regular basis. His marks in his class have actually fallen, and his delinquency in school and out of school has actually increased more than it has been. We've actually contacted the parents and seen how that's actually affected him, but it seems that he's now associating with other people outside of his schooling life. His association with other students has been affected. He seems to be more isolated from his students as well.
Oh, you're shrink, Dylan!
Shouldn't be discriminating, but we're looking for a championship. We're looking for players to go on to college. Dylan was one of my top players. He was my guy. He was my go-to. And look, when he didn't get that sprout over the break, I was left with no choice. It's nothing against the kid. I do hope he seeks a bit of help. But yeah, it's unfortunate, but Coleman and Henry suggest that hormonal and physical changes are omnipresent throughout adolescence, and that the transition from childhood to adulthood are characterised by identity and self-consciousness. It's obvious that Dylan is going through change, and it's evident that he is becoming withdrawn and engaging with high-risk activities. It's vital that we keep Dylan in school and as proactive as possible. We also need to surround him with pro-social peers and teachers, or he may stray further from us. Alongside his cognitive issues, Dylan is also facing a lack in social development. Arnett argues that conflict increases while closeness decreases during adolescence, and this is evident with the relationship that Dylan shares with his family. Dylan's parents have high ambitious goals for him, however Dylan has lost interest since going through puberty. This also correlates with the peer rejection he is going through. Results show that peer rejection correlates adolescence with worsened mood and increased anxiety compared with adults and children. I'm Bevan, this has been WS News.
Thank you, Bevan. I'm now joined in the studio by specialist Marcus Mark.
Thank you.
And via satellite, thank you. And via satellite, we have Coach James at the basketball courts and year advisor, Mr. Stephan in the school. Thank you. Mr. Stephan, first to you. Why do you think Dylan is now struggling at school?
Well, Donovan, Dylan's struggles began when he failed to make the rep sports team. Now, the teachers understand that this is due to his late developing puberty and physical stature. Due to this, the staff think he is not being selected for the rep teams, and this is causing him to struggle in the other classes. His social and mental well-being has been impaired, such as Well, Dylan is also happening to engage in antisocial behaviour, skipping school, and there have been accusations of him being caught smoking and stealing.
Coach James, I'd like to bring you into the conversation now. What do you make of these accusations and assumptions from the staff and their consensus that the real reason for Dylan's poor academic standards is because of his omission from the team?
Despite what the professionals say, look, it doesn't matter. I understand he's going through puberty, but at the end of the day, I'm here to win a championship for the school. He was a great player, and I still believe he has a skill, but at this stage, he's just not a suitable part for my team.
Okay, I'm now joined by, I'd like to bring Dr. Marcus into the conversation. What solutions do you believe we should bring into this?
Well, Stefan, you bring up a very good point here. Now, to bring a student back to the classroom, there actually is numerous strategies where we can bring them back in. One of the focuses that we've actually found out is that we can look at a strength-based focus of return to the classroom. It's a strategy in line to invite the student back to the classroom where they feel most appropriate in the world. Now, Hawthorne 2009 follows a schematic model of this.
Okay, well, it's an interesting model. Could you explain it a bit further?
Well, as you can see, we have to identify the talents of the student. Now, in this case, Dylan here is still interested in drama. Now, we can use drama as a building block to emphasise his return to the classroom. This can come in the form of his cognition in social and emotional developments and the self-awareness that adolescents can struggle with. Now, to develop into strengths, we find that it is a process of encouraging students' engagement and the activation of emotion from teaching to strengths, and accelerating learning by helping students utilise their strengths. Now, it's a Bates-Krakoff and McGrath acknowledgement from 2017. Now, it's only a recent study, but accelerating learning in one area can provide an ability to, within the context of a positive character, it enables Dylan as a student to reflect onto their actions, both socially and emotionally. Now, it's a step-by-step process. First, I'm bringing them back into engagement in the classroom. This is by drama initially, but reintroduction to the classroom by their peers. They could get back into the sports, back into mathematics, back into engaging with teachers and their social peer group. As a goal-setting approach outlined in the graph, as you can see, we find that it's a positive and proactive experience with the aim for Dylan to hold onto the energy and the emotions, identify and maintain a constructive engagement for the future. Now, the final part of this is opportunities to apply one's strengths. It's just a way, maybe not to get back into the sporting team, but to re-engage him in the school setting. It keeps him in school and keeps him engaged in his subjects. Now, Johnson 2003 determines that this is imperative to increasing look at our strength building. Now, for yourself, building strategies and outcomes, it is an advocate of positive psychology. Positive psychology in a school setting is very important for re-engaging students. Greenberg's research has suggested that engaging school environments is linked to well-being and proactive engagement at school and academic performance. Now, aligning this multi-purpose plan to Dylan can provide an insight into how he can re-engage and re-establish himself in the school system.
Okay, I'd just like to interrupt you there for a second, Mark. I'd like to bring up the idea of cognitive-based therapy, or CBT, in a school-based setting. Obviously, this is targeted at personal strategies to combat current problems and negative thinking patterns, which I believe Dylan may be suffering from. Now, Beck, 2011, he stated that the basis of cognitive behavioural therapy is that people's emotions, behaviours, and physiology are all influenced by the way we perceive the events that we encounter. He's perceiving this to be negative, and this is affecting his thoughts and his actions in the school environment. According to recent studies, there is a successful way of delivering this therapy online, and we've seen how through Palermo and through studies in Norway and by Grandi in 2016 that this CBT method of treatment can be done in an online way without a therapist or without requiring a therapist in-house in the school. And studies have shown from goodtherapy.org that 78% of adolescents in the internet groups have experienced success with the therapy compared to 80% with that in-house therapist. So some examples we've got is thiswayup.org and Brave for You, run by the University of Queensland, correct? Mr. Stefan, do you believe this would be effective?
Well, cognitive-based therapy do have their advantages. One of them is that it's a recognised treatment for Dylan. Yes, he is perceived that he wants a desired future and outcome, Dylan does have a want on his future, and through CBT therapy, it might be a way that he can utilize this to engage in the behavior he's seen for his future. Yes, it can be negative, mainly being the costs and the active participation of Dylan himself. Backtracking to the strength-based focused learning, as an advantage, it's that we focus on his strengths and use it as a building block to develop him socially and emotionally as a cognitive base. Rather than focus on his deficiencies, it will provide him a chance to demonstrate what his strengths are. Unfortunately, the current model of deficient-focused education and learning places an emphasis on identifying children's weaknesses and not their strengths. As an alternative to negative approaches to the strength-based learning, it's just that he has to be a willing participant, likewise with the CBT therapy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Stefan, and thank you, Marcus and Coach James, for joining us here today on Inside Sport. And thank you at home for joining us as well. Thanks. Bye.
Hi, my name's Gian. This is Adolescent Teaching and Learning Personal Reflection. I really enjoyed this unit overall. It was quite informative, a lot of theory that was useful, that will be useful in the future. I loved the idea of Epstein's view on adolescence and Gede's view on adolescence. It's good to get an insight on all these different theories, and while I do agree with some, I don't agree with others. I don't believe that children should be given the responsibility to marry or to run businesses or anything like that, but I do believe that they should be given a responsibility. As teachers in the classroom, we do have the chance to give them these responsibilities. Growing into adults, I think it's important to slowly drip feed some kind of responsibility as these kids are turning into adults soon. We should start treating them like adults, start giving them responsibilities such as, team captain on a sports team, or doing stuff for the teacher or the office or whatever. I do believe that's important. And I think it's important within a classroom to keep it safe as well, restrict bullying and all that kind of stuff. As a teacher, I am looking to restrict any kind of bad stuff as much as possible. I always want to be able to help my students as well, and know that I can't take on a counselling role, but I guess to follow the GRIP method, gather, respond, involve and promote. I think it's very important to implement that, and look, that's something that I learned throughout the unit. I really enjoyed this unit. There was a lot that I got out of it. Second assessment was great as well. A lot of research to do with kids and puberty and adolescence, and I just had an overall great time. Thank you, Jose. Have a good afternoon, day, night.
This is Adolescence Development and Teaching lesson. This is the critical reflection for assessment 2. As a subject as a whole, and what I've learnt in this unit, formerly a retail manager, I can actually reflect this on my actions when I was dealing with teenage staff. What have you learnt? Probably the most important aspects I've learnt has been Vygotski's concept of proximal development and the scaffolding theory. Now, as a strategy in teaching is the ability of hot and cold cognitions in learning activities. Now, not saying it's just enclosed to learning activities in general, but just to see how the cognition of an individual, especially adolescents, changes their ability to reason, reflect and judge in their own personal circumstance. So one of the key things is always to have the adolescent student on the same page as you. If you're not communicating with the student and the parents or the staff, it really doesn't create a good communication ground. Taking from the subject is the need for individual interaction time with students. As a former retail manager, I was active in this with the individual staff members, and I can probably use this as a strategy in assisting students through Vygotski's scaffolding. As a teaching aspect in regards to my teaching area of business studies, one of the key areas I've stated multiple times is the scaffolding and zone of proximal development. For this KLA, I think it'll be very important to understand how this can be used as a teaching strategy and guide with students both cognitively, emotionally and educational wise, is that it bridges gaps between students and their learning abilities, as well as factoring in emotional and social development in between students.
Hi, my name is Michael Carmona, and this is my personal reflection for adolescence development and training. One of the most interesting things I've learned from this unit is that adolescence is not just a time of physical development, It's also a time of cognitive development. From one of the readings, Smith, Chine and Steinberg 2013, we learn about this idea of hot versus cold cognition, which basically means because of different maturation rates in the adolescent brain, sometimes it will be difficult for adolescents to make the right choices. And this is something I plan to take into consideration when I'm a teacher. One of the key educational things that I've learned from this unit is Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. I plan on using this in the classroom to ensure that any activity I ask students to learn is just outside of what their current capabilities are, and this will help me as a teacher. From the textbook, Arnett 2014, we learn about cultural differences and how this can affect students as they're going through adolescence. I need to be sensitive to that as a teacher because in Australia we have a multicultural student population that, because of different cultures, I need to be sensitive of everybody's journey through adolescence. And specifically to my key learning area, I believe in business studies, is going to be the idea of element interactivity. Some of the curriculum would be required to be learned as low element interactivity, just bits of information that don't require reference to too much else. But some of it would be high element interactivity. This is like when we're calculating financial statements or ratios based on financial statements. So I plan to take this into consideration when I'm a teacher to ensure that I'm aware of what I'm teaching them and whether it's high element interactivity or low element interactivity. This is from Sweller 2010. Thank you.